This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. Seth Merrill of Equidaily.com, typically joined by Steve Bick of Sirius and XM's At the Races, but Bick on vacation this week. We gave him the total week off, not even calling in. So hopefully he's enjoying himself. A couple of weeks, if you've been listening to his radio program, you will note that there's been best ofs this past week. He's also on vacation from the radio show this coming week, so a couple of weeks off. So hopefully he's kicked back and enjoying himself. I'll get my Sunday morning in here one of these weeks coming up as well, as we are in the pre-Saratoga mode. So everybody's trying to get their rest and relaxation in before Saratoga kicks off, 3 weeks from this past Friday. So it is coming up quick. And coming up a little bit later on today's show, going to be joined by John White of Santa Anita. We're going to talk obviously a little bit about the stakes action yesterday, including the Gold Cup and the Triple Bend, but also just do a little review of this unique spring meet at Santa Anita, as it is ready to wrap up this afternoon, the spring meet at Santa Anita. New out there in Southern California. It seemed to go pretty well, but we'll get some thoughts on it from John White a little bit later on. Some of the news over the past few days, week, 24 hours, a little bit longer. I like to go over some going back a week on the Sunday show, because we don't know who watches as compared to weekdays on Racing Across America and then Sunday. So I'll touch on some of the stories that we hit on a little bit earlier this week on the weekday show. But one of them that is brand new is we're going to talk some stakes action as the show goes along from yesterday. But one of the stakes that do want to touch on, and I'll show a replay of this sometime on Racing Across America this week, but the Irish Derby, Australia. It looks like Aidan O'Brien has a nice runner there. Aidan O'Brien himself wins the Irish Derby yesterday for the 11th time. Pretty good. And Australia wins as the 1-8 favorite in the $1 million plus Irish Derby. Mile and a half, ran the mile and a half in 2:33.19. Australia came out of a victory in the Epsom Derby, follows it up with a win in the Irish Derby. O'Brien says they may head for the Champion Stakes on September 13th, mile and a quarter against older horses. That may be the game plan a little bit later on. I don't know whether he has anything planned in between them. Not a shocker if not. I mean, they like to space things out as much as we do over here, sometimes more, sometimes less. If you go over to Australia, they'll bang them together a little bit. But over in Europe, they can put in as big a gap as we do over here. But as noted in a follow-up story to the race, the job for Australia got a little bit easier yesterday when Kingston Hill, who was second to Australia in the Epsom Derby, that one scratched out of the Irish Derby yesterday, so it became a little bit easier. Australia, a pretty easy winner against four others yesterday in the Irish Derby. But again, looks like Aidan O'Brien with a nice three-year-old over there in Europe. Speaking of three-year-olds, over here in our country, Bob Baffert has made plans for a couple of his three-year-olds. Can the Man, who won the Grade 3 Affirmed at Santa Anita on June 7th, looks to be pointed towards this new race out there, the $500,000 Los Alamitos Derby, which is shaping up to be a nice race in its first running. Shared Belief scheduled to go, Candy Boy scheduled to go, and now Can the Man for Bob Baffert. But more intriguing in this article from the Racing Forum that talks about plans for some Baffert runners, Bayern headed for the Haskell. That's what Baffert is looking at right now. The $1 million Haskell at Monmouth Park on July 27th, coming out of that incredible win on Belmont Stakes Day in the Woody Stevens. Bayern, I think, is attract a lot of attention and excitement to the Haskell. Subsequently, we talked with guests on Racing Across America over the past couple of weeks, wondering if this would be the game plan, because Bob Baffert has shown an affinity for heading to the Haskell with good three-year-olds, and Bayern certainly, I think, his running style, his profile fits Monmouth Park very well. So again, he adds some intrigue to this three-year-old race that is a little bit earlier in the summer than the Travers, but Bayern is now confirmed, headed to the Haskell at Monmouth Park by Bob Baffert. Totalist, on the other hand, comes out of the Belmont Stakes, putting in his first workout since that win yesterday on the main track at Belmont Park. Christophe Clement, the trainer, timed him in 49 for 4 furlongs, and then considered the 5 furlongs more of a gallop. The Racing Association clockers had the 5 furlong work in 102.60. They're going to get him up to Saratoga. Clement said they'd been thinking potentially about the Haskell for Tonalist, but they're leaning more towards the Jim Dandy at this point. Jim Dandy, of course, on July 26th, worth $600,000. So Tonalist likely for a couple of starts up at Saratoga, kicking things off with a start in the Jim Dandy, and then likely, of course, going on to the Belmont Stakes. California Horse Racing Board, this was a story from a few days ago. Kent Desormeaux missed his mounts on Thursday, and so there was a little bit of consternation whenever these jockeys not just miss mounts, but don't report. That triggers obvious, as I say, consternation and an investigation, and they're looking into things. Desormeaux missed his mounts on Thursday, rode on Friday. A CHRB spokesman said at this time there's an open investigation and we can't comment. And Kent Desormeaux said, I have nothing to say. I'll handle it in here with the stewards, he's implying. So no comment from anybody, but you always scratch your head on these kind of situations when the jockeys kind of go missing. And for some reason, it seems to be a Southern California thing. Of course, Patrick Valenzuela, well known for a couple of these kind of incidents. But hopefully Desormeaux, hopefully it's nothing and they get it smoothed out, because Desormeaux, the last couple of years has been kind of trying to get the career maybe back on track a little bit. He's a guy with a lot of talent. Bounced around, was in Chicago. There was the great story in the Racing Forum looking at his career by Marty McGee, within the past year or so. And he made a couple of trips earlier this year out to Southern California, Santa Anita, to ride in some stakes races, and did very well on a couple of days out there. Subsequently moved his tack and was riding pretty well out there. So again, hopefully it turns out to be much ado about nothing after the investigation. He can continue to try to make again, a little bit of a career resurgence out there in Southern California. Talked a little bit about it on the Handicappers Report earlier. There was a couple of instances of fisticuffs on racetracks earlier this week at Delaware Park. The leading trainer, Juan Vasquez, and jockey Trevor McCarthy had a little go at it in the winner's circle back on Monday. What happened there was in the opening race, Trevor McCarthy was on a horse and bothered Juan Vasquez's horse in the opening race at Delaware on Monday. 2 or 3 races later, they again both had horses in a race. And as Trevor McCarthy was weighing out, Juan Vasquez approached him, and there was a little scuffle that ensued. Subsequently, the authorities down there called them both in. Juan Vasquez, leading trainer again at Delaware Park, suspended 90 days and fined $2,500. He plans to appeal, as some of the articles about this have noted. This was not Vasquez's first run-in with the authorities over maybe an anger management kind of issue. He was suspended for 30 days by the Maryland Racing Commission back in February of 2013 after being an aggressor in an altercation at Bowie. So Vasquez on the sidelines for 90 days, $2,500 fine, although there will be an appeal. But over at Churchill at the end of the week, Dale Romans and Indian Charlie. And if you're not familiar with Indian Charlie, he puts out that kind of gossip sheet at the various racetracks. You can certainly have found it around Saratoga for many years, although subsequently the past probably 3 months or so, we have to go back. One of the sheets he put out was deemed offensive to minorities, and he's been banned from a number of tracks with the sheet. The sheet is still available online, and as I say, it's kind of a gossip sheet, news, opinion maybe, but it's provocative to say the least, and within the past couple of weeks, he took a shot on the sheet at Dale Romans, and Indian Charlie is actually Ed Musselman. And so Musselman and Dale Romans crossed paths on the Churchill Downs backstretch. I think it was Thursday morning, and it was Thursday morning. and subsequently they had a little scuffle. And this one, Indian Charlie was said to have a black eye, and Dale Romans, folks saw him after the fight, and he had a bloody nose. And so there was, again, a little bit of a dust-up there. The outcome of that, Indian Charlie, Ed Musselman, has been banned from Churchill Downs, backside and front side, pending an investigation there. So, interesting that a couple of brawls. I mean, it's unusual to hear something like that out in public. I'm sure this stuff goes on in the jockey's room, but out of sight and sound of the betting public. But these, well, the Musselman Real Romans one was at least on the backstretch, but it certainly attracted some attention from the media. Also from this past week, just want to touch on, again, if you're not a weekday viewer to Racing Across America, do want to note, we have talked over the past couple of months or so about the situation down in Virginia with Colonial Downs. They had a meeting earlier this week, the Virginia Racing Commission. And over the past couple of weeks, the thought process was they would try to get something going to maybe have a condensed meet at Colonial Downs. Well, the proposal that was put on the table earlier this week was from the Virginia Racing Commission, was essentially to scrap 2014 at Colonial Downs if the operators of the track will step up and commit to a 2015 season, 24 days. That will allow them to open up their LTB parlors and whatnot. So for all intents and purposes, I think you can draw a big X through Colonial this year, which is too bad because it's fun racing, it's turf racing, and everybody likes that. So it looks like Colonial Downs done for this year, but we still have to wait and see what's on the horizon and whether 2015 will happen. We'll get an idea of that shortly, I would think. Also, we mentioned last week, this to me is a complete head scratcher and puts things completely in flux at Suffolk Downs. There was the legislation, the referendum that was put on the ballot where the folks in Massachusetts okayed casinos and a limited number in various locations. And Suffolk Downs had their hat in the ring for the Boston location along with another group. They have been proceeding with that, and the decision of where the Boston casino would go was supposed to be made within the next couple of months, I think, at the latest. And as I say, both of these operators have been pursuing with their plans and whatnot and meeting with people, and Suffolk Downs has stated that if they don't wind up with a casino, that could be the end of racing up there. So we've been watching that situation in Massachusetts closely. And again, that decision was going to be made fairly soon. But the Massachusetts Supreme Court decided last week that they can put another referendum on the ballot this November to see if they want to scrap casinos. So they haven't even gotten them going, and you just have to wonder, how does this work? And how could a casino ever get up and going if every November you can vote on it again? But it will be on the November ballot, whether they want casinos or not. The harness track up there, which was awarded a slots parlor, has already put a lot of money into it. They're continuing to go forward, but they're totally up in the air. And the mayor of Boston has come out at the end of last week to say, why don't we just stop this casino process at this point, because everything could be moot in November. Now the casino operators are kind of pushing, let's get a decision made. But again, the situation in Massachusetts now is completely in flux, so we'll have to see what that's going to mean for Suffolk Downs going forward, because it looks like at this point we don't know what's going to happen in the future in Massachusetts until November. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, we're going to take a look at one stakes race before we go to a break. Before I want to look at the Mother Goose, but before I look at that, I just wanted to touch on, I mentioned this a little earlier on the Handicappers Report, but there was an unfortunate incident out at Arlington yesterday in the Chicago Handicap Grade 3 event for fillies and mares going 7 furlongs. Talked a little bit about it last week on Racing Across America with Gabby Gaudet. And one of the horses that, of course, was a little bit interesting was Apropos, who had run very well down at Oaklawn this past winter, had run a nice third behind Judy the Beauty and the Madison 2 starts back. But Apropos, a career winner of over $250,000. She had a little mishap in the paddock before the race on yesterday, and flipped, had a head injury and had to be euthanized. So really an unfortunate incident in the paddock before the Chicago handicap yesterday at Arlington. Subsequently, the race was won by My Option for Chris Block, who pretty prolific trainer out there in the Chicago area, although this year the stats are, percentage-wise are middling, but he does get it done at 5-1 with My Option yesterday in the Chicago handicap. And as noted, I'm going to take a look now. I want to give everybody a chance to see Untappable yesterday in the Mother Goose. Probably the performance of the weekend. We were all waiting for this one on the comeback since the May 2nd win in the Kentucky Oaks. Untappable is the number 2 horse here. Had a little bit of trouble early in the race when Princess Violet came over and maybe tightened things up just a little bit. And John Velasquez had to check just a little bit early in the race. But as you can see, did not affect things late in the race, as Untappable does romp here by, according to the chart, just over 9 lengths as the 1-9 favorite. Princess Violet subsequently, the 8-1 second choice, will finish second. The unfortunate thing to me in here was the scratch of Stop Charging Maria, just because that one was coming out of a win in the Black Eyed Susan. Was going to have to step it up a little bit, but I thought, face off between the Kentucky Oaks winner and the Black Eyed Susan winner was going to be a little bit interesting. But Stop Charging Maria for Pletcher and Rapoli winds up scratching. So it's a field of 5. Pretty convincing win from Untappable. Untappable now going to head up to Saratoga. And according to a follow-up on the DRF website, the Haskell is maybe out there on the horizon. If not the Haskell, Coaching Club American Oaks, July 20th up at Saratoga. So we'll have to see which direction they move in with Untappable. Untappable yesterday paying $210 and $210. NYRA had canceled show wagering, but there was still a minus place pool of $160,000. And once they hit the stretch, no consternation for the bridge jumpers into the place pool yesterday in the Mother Goose. So again, nice performance from Untappable yesterday in the Mother Goose. All right, that's going to bring us to our first break, and when we come back, we will be joined. Oh, no, actually, when we come back, we're going to look at the Prairie Meadow races. I was ahead of myself. A little bit later on, we'll be joined by John White from Santa Anita to touch on their action from yesterday. But before that, we're going to take a quick break here and take a look at some of that Prairie Meadows action from yesterday, the Iowa Derby, Iowa Oaks, and the Cornhusker. All of that right after this.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Go Zephyr kicking clear, and Go Zephyr is pulling away impressively.
Hysterical Lady Ginger Punch to win it.
And it's Wilco in front, and he's going to pull off a huge upset here.
But it's Round Pond going on to take the distaff.
Awesome again. Sire of 10 Grade 1 winners, 4 Breeders' Cup champions, and 4 multimillionaires, standing at Adena Springs.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what can be better than that? How about 2 Stadium Cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. Seth Merrow in the studio. Steve Bick on vacation this week. I think Bick will be back in with us next week. Going to take, again, a look at the action at Prairie Meadows on Saturday. They had 3 nice graded stakes races on their card. And we'll kick things off. We'll take a look at the Grade 3 Iowa Oaks yesterday. 3-year-old fillies, $200,000 on the line, a mile and a 16th. And this one was notable because Ria Antonia was amongst the group in here. Ria Antonia went off as the 2-to-1 favorite. Ria Antonia was the number 4 horse. Also watched number 5, Sugar Shock, disappointing. You see there back of the field, Sugar Shock was pulled up as the 5-to-2 third choice in here. I thought Sugar Shock was interesting. But number 4, Ria Antonia, winds up running second. The winner in here is number 3, Size. You can see a nice late run from Ria Antonio, but a little too late. Size got the jump on her. Size at 13-to-1. Would have been hard for me to pull the trigger. I used the wrong lightly raced Bill Mott horse on the card. Size comes in with only 3 career starts for Bill Mott and Claiborne, and gets it done in the 4th career start. Looked pretty good, 13-to-1, so the betting public was unconvinced. Junior Alvarado on board, but Size does get it done. Ria Antonio runs second. And again, Ria Antonio was the 2-to-1 favorite, also a 2-to-1, but the second choice, Thank You Mary Lou, for Ken Ramsey and Mike Maker, winds up running a disappointing 7th in the field of 9. And as I say, the real, and I tried to look up and find, I haven't been able to find it. I'll do a little more research when I get home today, but I tried to find out what the situation was with Sugar Shock, because I talked last week on Racing Across America. I thought Sugar Shock was interesting off the couple of races down at Oaklawn this year that were very good, and then it won a little stake coming into this at Prairie Meadows over a muddy track too. So, you know, track condition I don't think affected things, but Sugar Shock, you know, this is a horse, 4 wins and 8 career starts, and again, including a stakes win over this track most recently. So for her to be pulled up like that, I think there had to be something going on. I just haven't seen a follow-up yet, but I'll keep my ear to the ground there, and we'll follow up on Racing Across America, certainly, because I'm sure there will be some comments, because that was just such a disappointment. But Size gets it done for Bill Mott and Claiborne Farm in the Iowa Oaks. Subsequently, right after that, the Iowa Derby for, obviously with the Derby title, 3-year-olds, Grade 3 event, $250,000, mile and a 16th. And a little bit of an upset in here. Michael Stedham's Jessica Star is going to get it done at 9-to-1. Jessica Star is the number 6 horse. Number 1 is Embellishing Bob, who 2 starts back had moved up on the DQ of Byron in the Derby trial to win, subsequently well beaten by Byron in the Woody Stevens. But Embellishing Bob runs second, and here is the number 1 horse. The favorite, number 8, Vickers in Trouble, 7-to-5 favorite for Ken Ramsey, runs third in here. And again, Jessica Star at 9-to-1. That's one that, you know, you could have pulled the trigger on that one, in that had won a little stakes race prior, and those are always kind of interesting. You know, the experience over the track at some of these tracks like this, or Tampa Bay or whatnot, you have to pay a little bit of attention to that. But this horse was going to have to probably step it up a little bit, although number-wise fits in. But you look at Vickers in Trouble, and certainly, you know, going to that Louisiana Derby win 2 starts back, that horse probably was the one that number-wise you tilted towards. But again, Jessica Star had some numbers that were probably comparable to most of the field, and also comparable to Vickers in Trouble if that one came back to some numbers that this one had fired at various points in the career. But going back to the Louisiana Derby number, the Lecomte number, Vickers in Trouble was going to be the one to beat, but winds up third in there. Jessica Star does get it done for Michael Stidham in the Iowa Derby. And then finally, among the stakes action, out at Prairie Meadows on Saturday, it was the Cornhusker Handicap. Eurygena, I said last week, was the horse that I found very interesting. The one horse winds up running sixth in the field of 8 at 16-1. I thought that there would be a nice price, and I thought we'd get a better run than that. Unfortunately, not to be. The winner in here will be the number 7, Carve. And Carve goes out for Brad Cox and had won an optional claimer at Churchill most recently and done it pretty well. But Carve is a horse that has been knocking around Stakes Company and certainly has proven to be competitive at that level. Gets it done in a nice ding-dong battle here. Number 7, Carve, over number 4, Right to Vote. Right to Vote had won a stakes race at Prairie Meadows most recently. So again, some action over the course, some success over the course had proved beneficial in here. Ground Transport, the West Point thoroughbred runner, winds up running 3rd. Had come into the Brooklyn most recently off a couple of stakes wins, and I thought was interesting in the Brooklyn last time, but at a 1.5 miles, just that proved just too long for a Ground Transport, but a good 3rd from that one yesterday, and a nice close finish in the Cornhusker Handicap. Golden Ticket, of course, who we remember up here from the Dead Heat in the Travers. And Golden Ticket, a horse with a lot of talent, but this year in 4 career starts, only a couple of second-place finishes. Now, most recently had finished behind Moonshine Mullen, who's turned out to be a monster in a couple of starts. So, I could see Golden Ticket taking some action, but to me, off the record this year, to go off as the 6-5 favorite, the betting public maybe who gave Golden Ticket a little too much credit. And again, that one does disappoint a little bit as the 6-5 favorite running 4th. But Carve does wind up getting it done in here for trainer Brad Cox. Has now struck a couple of wins together. And again, a horse that in the past has proven to be a stakes level performer at kind of this grade 3 level, bouncing around the country. Now has over $400,000 in earnings. We'll see where Carve goes next out. All right, we'll take our next break, and when we come back, as promised a little bit earlier, we're going to be joined by John White of Santa Anita. Going to talk a little stakes action from Southern California yesterday, of course highlighted by the Gold Cup and also the Grade 1 Triple Bend. And we'll just get an overview of this spring meet at Santa Anita as it prepares to wind up later this afternoon. All of that right after this. The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right, the 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Firecracker on July 12th. So sign up today, online at capitalotb.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night school in the buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
I didn't want to get just any degree after high school.
Horse racing has always been my passion.
I was already a lawyer.
When I was young, my dad took me to the races. The sound of the crowd. I still remember.
I'm 40, and I don't want to stay in a career I don't love.
I want to follow my passion.
Follow your passion at the University of Arizona Racetrack Industry Program.
Summer at Saratoga, and there's no better place to watch all the racing action than right here on OTB TV. Each morning, the Handicappers Report brings you selections and analysis from our professional handicappers. Then stick around as the biggest names in racing join us live from the backstretch. The top trainers, jockeys, and racing personalities all share their unique insights and observations. For more than 20 years, there's been just one place to turn for unparalleled coverage of the Saratoga Racing Meet, Capital OTB and OTB TV.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. Always happy to be joined by our friend John White from Santa Anita. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
And big day of racing there yesterday. This afternoon winds things up for the unique spring meet. We'll talk all of that as we progress along here. And John, why don't we get right into the Gold Cup yesterday, because obviously all eyes were on Game On Dude going for his third win in this race. Gold Cup handicap obviously used to be the Hollywood Gold Cup. No Hollywood anymore, but it is still run out there in Southern California. Grade 1 event, $500,000, mile and a quarter. And John, we're going to watch the stretch run here and see the upset from Majestic Harbor. Clubhouse Ride. Majestic Harbor will be the 6th horse as we watch. Clubhouse Ride number 3, Imperative number 4, and Game On Dude, the number 1 horse, the 4-5 favorite, will wind up finishing 4th. And John, again, it just looks like one of those situations where Game On Dude, when he gets his way early, he is very tough. But with Fury Cap Corey out there cutting some fast fractions, it worked against him yesterday.
Well, it does appear to be that indeed, Seth. I think you are absolutely right. And also, I think in the case of Game On Dude, we're starting to see age play a factor here. He's getting up there. He's getting miles on him. And I don't really think he is quite the horse, especially from a consistency standpoint, that he once was, even maybe last year. And, you know, they're not machines. And as I was telling one fella yesterday, I said it just goes to show you once again how remarkable some horses are, like, say, John Henry. Because here's Game On Dude, who now is just 1 for 4 this year, and at the age of 7, whereas John Henry at the age of 9 accomplished enough to be Horse of the Year. I talk about that accomplishment a lot on HRTV, the fact that John Henry was Horse of the Year at 9, and I do so because it's one of those accomplishments that I really question whether we'll ever see that again. I mean, we might, but we might not. I mean, it's that phenomenal. So, you know, it just puts a little perspective on this in terms of what John Henry did. And Game On Dude, I mean, he ran a really good race in the Santa Anita Handicap, his only win this year. On the other hand, again, as I was talking with somebody at Santa Anita yesterday, as we were digesting this Gold Cup at Santa Anita, at the time, Game On Dude's performance in the Santa Anita Handicap was considered to be outstanding, mainly because of who he beat. Plus, he did make history in being the first 3-time winner of the Santa Anita Handicap. And he certainly deserves a lot of credit for that. I mean, that in and of itself is an accomplishment that Game On Dude and his connections should be extremely proud of. But when you really look at the big cap now, and you say, well, he beat Will Take Charge, and Will Take Charge hasn't exactly set the world on fire this year. He certainly has not done as much as I thought he was going to, based on what he did the second half of last year. And then Mucho Macho Man, you know, is not even in training and hasn't raced since the Santa Anita Handicap. Those were his 2 big foes that he met in the Santa Anita Handicap. So now you look at the Santa Anita Handicap and you say, well, you know, maybe even that wasn't quite as good as we thought at the time. And it's one reason why, you know, we try to draw these conclusions on these races. It's human nature. Within seconds after the race, you know, the rest of the day, the next morning as we are now. But as Charles Hatton, the great columnist and writer for the Daily Racing Forum, said many times, it takes time to really put things into perspective. And that's why a lot of times I do like to look back at some of these things that we drew conclusions for, like the big cap, and then maybe take a reevaluation of what we thought at the time.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit earlier on the Handicappers Report. Jeff Carl and I were in here, and Jeff was saying age is catching up, and I totally agree. But I noticed post-race comments, Bob Baffert is looking at the Pacific Classic, and I was out of town over the past couple of days, so I haven't seen the social media yet, but it won't surprise me if there's, you know, the typical calls of, oh, he's over the top, and send him to the sidelines. But he is a gelding, and you do look at that Santa Anita Handicap, and yeah, we may have overrated it, but I still think picking his spots, until he strings 2 or 3 of these together, I have no problem with him going on. As you say, it may be a consistency thing, but the right field and the right day, I still think at this point, I'd like to see him run, and so I'd like to see, at least one more in that Pacific Classic. I have no arguments there. You go back, as you say, John Henry was very, very special. Forgo is a 7-year-old. Well, we have a Met Mile and a Woodward win, but by the time he got to 8, he had gotten over the hill. So Father Time catches up to everybody. But looking at that,
of course, excuse me for interrupting, but I will say in the case of Forgo and Kelso, those two horses, not only did age somewhat catch up on them, but I think more of a factor for both of those was the weight that they had to carry throughout their careers. Yeah. And that helped John Henry immensely, as Ron McAnally was a master at being able to keep the real heavyweight off of John Henry. And I think that played a significant role in why John Henry was able to still be going as strong as he did to be a horse of the year at the age of 9. But the concern here to me for Game On Dude, we're not just looking at this Santa Anita handicap. You really have to look at it, I think, in the context of his recent body of work. And he's now lost 5 of his last 6.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of sobering here, that as good as he's been for his career, that he now is in a stretch where he has lost 5 of his last 6.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the weight is a very good point, because I'm looking here at the PPs of Game On Dude, and obviously you see nothing over 130. And if you look down the lifetime past performances of Forgo, or as you say, Kelso, that would be a totally different scenario. But it's a new game here in the 21st century. And yeah, John Henry was probably right at the turn of that, where trainers really started to place their horses a little bit. And subsequently, I think racing secretaries have heard that loud and clear.
He really was the turning point in this sport, and I'll tell you why. What happened is that racing became much more national during the early 1980s, during John Henry's time, because in the cases of Kelso and Forgo, Kelso came out and ran a couple of times in California, but I mean, they were basically East Coast horses, and what John Henry was, he was a national horse, and Ron McAnally was able to play all the tracks against each other. And John Henry was so important to attendance, on-track attendance. Now, again, that's not as key today, because John Henry was running in the pre-simulcast era. And so from that standpoint, today, most of the people aren't at the track anyway. Many more people watched and wagered on the Gold Cup at Santa Anita yesterday than away from Santa Anita than at Santa Anita. So, but McAnally really made it clear, you put a lot of weight on John Henry, he's not going to run in the race. And the pressure really got applied to these racing secretaries from the management of the tracks, saying, look, we need this for our bottom line at the track. We need, the on-track attendance. We need the handle. Because there was no off-track attendance, other than the OTB in New York. There was no off-track wagering anywhere except the OTB in New York. So it was the turning point in our sport. And your point about Game On Dude, I mean, this is another concern. It's not like he's been carrying a lot of weight. Yeah. He's been carrying, modest weights for a horse of his accomplishments, really. So it makes me really come to the conclusion that perhaps, it is, and it isn't necessarily always one thing. I think it is a question of his age. But I think in the case of yesterday, too, there was the thought that this pace scenario, it was very interesting how it was going to unfold. And I mentioned that in the pre-race commentary from the paddock at Santa Anita. What was going to happen here with Game On Dude and Fury Cap Corey, Mike Smith on Game On Dude, and Gary Stevens on Fury Cap Corey, 2 Hall of Fame riders, and they're very smart riders. And Stevens knew that he could not let Game On Dude dictate the race, but by the same token, Mike Smith knew that if Gary Stevens wants to be aggressive and go to the front, he's kind of between a rock and a hard place, and if Smith goes with Fury Cap Corey, they'll just run each other into the ground, or if he lets Fury Cap Corey go, then he's going to have to try to stalk, which is what happened, but Game On Dude has never been at his best when he stalks. So I think the way the race unfolded also was a huge factor for Game On Dude. Bob Baffert made a statement on a radio show that has resonated with me ever since the San Antonio, because Baffert made the comment the next morning, and I think he did make a great observation. He said, Game On Dude is not a great horse, but he can run a great race under the right circumstances.
And that is a good point, because I think we've all seen in his career, as I said earlier, when he gets it his own way, he looks phenomenal. But there have been races in his career. But I will agree, you parse things out nicely. When you look at the last 5 races, that they don't stack up to what we had earlier in the career.
That's right.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next, and if they do go on to the Pacific Classic, whether he can bounce back or whether Father Time and other factors have caught up to him a little bit. All right, let's shift our attention now. Also on the card, another Grade 1 event yesterday at Santa Anita, the Triple Bend, and obviously all eyes were on Sahara Sky. Went off as the even money favorite, but boy, really disappointed. Sahara Sky, the number 4 horse, will run 6th in a field of 6, but it will be a ding-dong battle up front. Number 1, Declassify, will just get up as the 2-1 second choice over number 6, Cyclometer. Declassify going out for Bob Baffert had come into the race lightly raced, only 4 career starts, but nice Baffert runner, nice Baffert sprinter in the making, obviously. But again, a nice nose victory in a ding-dong battle. Declassify over Cyclometer, with, again, Sahara Sky being the disappointment in here.
Well, you rarely see a horse win in the manner that Declassify did, because if you stop the race 70 yards from the finish and you say, okay, now bet the race, I'm going to say 999 bettors out of 1,000 are going to bet Cyclometer, because he looked like he had the race won for sure. And that's 70 yards out. I would say that maybe even 10 yards out. I mean, that final resurge by Declassify was really something, and it's particularly to his credit from the standpoint that in his only 2 previous career victories, he had won by big margins, over 11 lengths, 7.5 lengths. He'd never won in a battle. Last time out, he was kind of in a battle, but he was coming off a layoff. He finished second to Seeking the Sheriff, and Declassify obviously moved forward off of his comeback race. But the gameness that he exhibited in this victory, and especially against a very good sprinter. Cyclometer's not chopped liver. He just won the Grade 3 Los Angeles at Santa Anita, and he's been holding his own in a lot of good sprint races. In fact, he had finished 9th, Cyclometer, in the race won earlier this year by Sahara Sky. And as you say, Sahara Sky, clearly the big disappointment in the race. And now, again, you can give any horse one day. And that, again, is what makes, when we think of these horses in what we saw, as I say, a lot of times I try to draw a parallel to one of our greats to show how great they were. And in the case of, let's say, Game On Dude having now lost 4 of his last 5, or Sahara Sky now 2 races that are disappointing back to back. I mean, he ran a very poor race at Churchill Downs in the Churchill Downs Stakes. Now this poor race in the Triple Bend, and he's getting up there somewhat in age at 6. But it makes you just sit and marvel at what Zenyatta did to win 19 straight, and especially with her come from behind style, is just, still, the more you look back at that, it's just mind-boggling to me that she would be able to do that. Because, as I say, they're not machines, and I will give a horse any one day, but when like in the case of Sahara Sky, what is really a concern here is now this would be back-to-back real clunkers for him, and for a horse that, at least in the past, when he had run a disappointing race, he would rebound. And so for him not to rebound, is a big concern for Sahara Sky. But this Declassify, in his first 2 victories, he looked like he was going to be one of the top sprinters in the country. I mean, he really looked like he would be a factor in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And he was a heavy favorite after his first 2 victories in what was going to be his prep for the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and he just ran a very poor race and went to the sidelines. So obviously something went amiss, and Bob Baffert in his post-race commentary, said there were just these issues that he's had. but and nothing, overly serious, but they've had to be patient with him, and the patience paid off because he wasn't even a stakes winner declassify going into the Triple Bend. He comes out of the Triple Bend not only a stakes winner, but now a Grade 1 stakes winner.
Yeah, and only his 5th career start as a 4-year-old. So again, he becomes a Grade 1 stakes winner. And John, I'm not a big gallop out guy, but as you were talking, we watched the stretch run, and he ran away from cyclometer on the gallop out. And as you say, if you had a bet on cyclometer, those are the kind of races. Horses never come back on the rail like that. You have to be shooting yourself.
Imagine if you're like alive in the pick six or something like that.
You think you have it in your pocket.
You're just sitting there shaking your head, and meanwhile, the people that played the classify, most of those people, if not all of them, are sitting there. They feel that the race is lost. Bob Baffert was asked right after the race by Michelle Yu, and what he thought. And he said, "I thought he was beat."
Yeah.
And if you watch races, there's no question the classified looked beat. So this is the epitome of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, because that's exactly what he did.
But it shows that Baffert, I think, has a very, very nice sprinter right now, a very gutsy win, so we'll keep our eyes on that one. All right, John, let's talk a little just overall, because, again, this is brand new out there in Southern California with the demise of Hollywood Park, spring meet at Santa Anita. Before we get into just some general overall thoughts, I want to talk on the human side of things and touch on this is the last day of racing. You would think Doug O'Neill probably has it wrapped up on the trainer side. He's 4 wins ahead, although I think technically Peter Miller maybe stands a chance. So on the trainer side, came down to Doug O'Neill and Peter Miller, Jerry Hollendorfer well back in 3rd. But more notable on the jockey side, talk a little bit about Joe Talamo. Obviously benefited from Bejarano being on the sidelines. But Talamo well in 1st place, 42 wins at the meet over Tyler Bays with 31. So it was a really good meet for Joe Talamo.
Well, it really was, no question about it. As you say, no question that Talamo benefited from Bejarano being out, because Bejarano has established himself as the dominant jockey on this circuit now once Joel Rosario left. Before Rosario left, we were having a situation where each meet, the title would either go to Rosario or Bejarano. Once Rosario left California, went back east, it was Bejarano, Bejarano, Bejarano. And so this is a very significant achievement for Joe Talamo and his agent, Scott McClellan, because this really puts Talamo much more closer to being in a situation like it was with Rosario and Bejarano, to where maybe he can continue to give Bejarano a run for his money once Bejarano comes back, and he is scheduled to resume riding at Del Mar. So the Del Mar meet is going to be interesting from that standpoint, to see if Talamo can, use some of this momentum from this meet and give Bejarano a run for his money for the title at Del Mar. And I think that's a possibility. So this was a big, win. It wasn't just winning this title, but in a bigger picture of Talamo really trying to establish himself as the, other top rider that we have on the circuit, as we had when we had the 2 top riders, Rosario and Bejarano.
Yeah, it seems like Talamo, has kind of been knocking at the door to get up in that area, and this certainly puts the spotlight on him a little bit, and as you say, going to make Del Mar very exciting, because what I've read is Bejarano looking for opening day for the comeback, so there'll be a little showdown between those two there. John, just give us also a little overview. How do the folks out at Santa Anita feel the spring meet went?
Overall, I think happy, because, it was going into uncharted territory. There were concerns about such things as the turf course, how it would hold up, and we haven't had hardly any rain here in Southern California, and so the fact that we didn't have rain meant that we could continually use the turf course. But that's the good news for bettors. And for the horsemen, we had all the turf racing, but it takes a wear and tear. We're not like Belmont where we have 2 turf courses. Yeah. It's tough on a track that has 1 turf course to have as much turf racing as we did, but it held up. So that I'm sure that they're just as much relieved almost as happy, but I'm sure they're happy and relieved. There was also concern about the heat, because at the end of the Santa Anita meet in the past, when we shifted over to Hollywood Park is close to the ocean, not like Del Mar where it's right next to the ocean, but it's much closer to the ocean than Santa Anita. And so you really had a much cooler weather situation at Hollywood Park than Santa Anita. And so there was a real concern about the heat at Santa Anita. Now, I chuckled about that a little bit because I've worked for the Racing Forum at Louisiana Downs in July and August. I mean, I've seen racing. I was at Xarban once, visited there in July. You know, it was like 103 in Omaha. Calder, I've been down there for the Summit of Speed, not only with the heat and the humidity. So, I mean, I thought people were kind of making a much ado about nothing for the most part for this worry about the heat at Santa Anita. But that said, you know, it isn't the most comfortable situation either, and especially trying to draw fans because, Santa Anita wasn't built for racing during hot weather. On the other hand, there were many fall meetings at Santa Anita, especially during the oak tree days, where there would be a lot of hot weather. So I was trying to remind people, you know, this isn't completely unprecedented that for Santa Anita to be racing in hot weather. And so I think all things considered, it went well. I mean, and the business was good. Certainly, because Hollywood Park had fallen down business-wise in recent years, pretty much as a lame duck track, that Santa Anita, the bar wasn't set real high, and Santa Anita did, so much better business than Hollywood Park did, and especially when you looked at these days of like during the 3 Triple Crown races, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont, Santa Anita's attendance and wagering was sky high up from Hollywood Park last year. So, that proved that this was really a plus for racing in Southern California to have Santa Anita racing during the Triple Crown rather than Hollywood Park.
And let me ask you a question. That you triggered something talking about attendance. Go back a couple of weeks, Father's Day. On my weekday show, I talked to folks at the various venues around the country. Father's Day at Arlington Park, they had a huge crowd. They had a huge crowd at Monmouth. Up at Fort Erie, they had a bang-up crowd. I did not realize Father's Day was such a big day. Was it a big day at Santa Anita?
No, I don't think it was.
Okay.
But, I think the thing that has happened at those venues, and especially I know this from Arlington, is that they have cultivated that and grown that. And so Santa Anita really has, we're just starting to race on Father's Day. So these are some of the things. This is why I think, and, certainly California Chrome played a role in this, too, for Santa Anita to be racing through the Triple Crown races. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better situation for Santa Anita for the first time to be running during the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and Belmont like this than to have California Chrome win the Derby, then the Preakness, and go for the Triple Crown and the Belmont. But that said, what's great is, this is just something Santa Anita can build from. And you're going to see some tweaking. I think they were somewhat disappointed with their Friday attendance. They had twilight racing, and they feel like that hasn't worked. So they're going to look at trying to do something different. Now, whether they can't, there's no lights, so they can't go to complete night racing either. So whether they go back to daytime, just on a Friday as normal, I don't know. But they're going to really look it over because they were disappointed with how the Friday twilights went. And part of the problem here in Southern California is that you're hitting kind of a real stacked-up time with the freeways. And the 210 freeway, which is the freeway that you use to get to Santa Anita, has become, I consider it the second worst freeway of all the freeways in the Los Angeles area now. The only worst one is the 405. This 210 is even worse than the 101 or the 5. And what has happened is once the 210 connected with I-15, which is the interstate to Vegas, it just ruined this 210. The traffic just is heavy at practically all hours of the day, and many truckers use that route now. They used to have to go down to Interstate 10. And instead of going down to Interstate 10, now they use this 210 to get over to the coast. So, that has really hurt Santa Anita, because if you're thinking about driving out to the track and you start to think of what you're going to deal with on that 210, unless you're a real avid race goer, you're going to go, you know what, I'll just forget it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because we don't think of those ancillary factors that play into attendance, but traffic these days. And out there in Southern California, where everybody drives every place, that becomes a big factor. And as I say, you're right, this was your first spring meet. You guys may want to press on that Father's Day thing, because I was amazed. I hadn't realized it, but out at Monmouth, Brian Skirko was telling me that was like their second biggest day of the season.
I think Emerald has made a success out of that too. Emerald Downs, I think, is another track.
I was amazed. I had no idea, but it seems like it's a big day. So maybe next year out at Santa Anita. John, I got to wrap things up. We always appreciate the visit. And again, the Santa Anita Spring Meet wraps up. Going to be excited to see how Los Al does. It looks like that Los Al Derby is shaping up to be kind of interesting. Then on to Del Mar, and then back to Santa Anita. So put your feet up for a couple of days and rest next week, and enjoy some of the early summer, and we'll catch up with you later on.
Great, Seth. Always great to be with you. And again, thanks for all your work with Equidaily. No question, Equidaily, by far. Let's put it this way, Seth. You've got the man of war of racing websites.
Thank you. I appreciate that. John White from Santa Anita. All right, that's going to wrap things up for Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. We talked with John White. We had a little stakes recap from around the country. It was a nice stakes day at the various venues yesterday on Saturday. But that's going to wrap things up for Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning. Don't forget, if you have questions, comments, suggestions, looseonthelead@yahoo.com. We would love to hear from you. And again, my partner Steve Bick on vacation this week. He should be back in the studio next week, though I'm assuming. We'll check on that as the week progresses. One more reminder, Andy Serling down here at the Clubhouse Racebook this afternoon. He's got the $1,500 bankroll, although the 50 participants have already been selected. But come down, because 12:15 to 12:45, Andy will have a handicapping seminar, and of course all afternoon long he will be analyzing the races live right here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. Come on down and enjoy the afternoon down here. That's going to wrap things up for Loose on the Lead for this Sunday morning, or every Sunday from 10 until 11 a.m. Handicappers Report was on a little bit earlier, so we're going to wrap things up now. But I do want to remind you, starting tomorrow, we'll be back in at 10 a.m. all week long with Racing Across America. So we're wrapping things up for the action on this Sunday morning, but we'll see you again right here tomorrow morning. Have a great afternoon at the races.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.